What if the only thread of hope left in a rain-drenched city came not from a man, but from a dog? Would you still follow that thread, even if it led straight into the dark? A German shepherd emerged from the silver mist of the savannah marshes, limping slightly, his fur soaked through and scored with the faint maps of old battles. He did not belong here. Under the canopy of live oaks, behind the white body of a parked patrol car, an officer lay bound and motionless while a figure in a long raincoat waited for the night to swallow the rest of the sound. No one saw the dog coming. No one expected him to choose a stranger. But he remembered the scent of fear, and what it felt like to be saved. What follows may make you cry, and maybe, just maybe, remind you that forgotten souls still get second chances. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe no person or animal should be left behind in the storm, hit subscribe, because this story might just restore your faith in miracles. Rain softened the edges of Savannah, dragging a gray hush down its cobblestone streets. The lamps along Bay Street blurred into long streaks of amber light. Spanish moss swayed like damp curtains, clinging to branches that had seen centuries of storms. The old bricks and crushed oyster shells held the day's warmth like quiet embers, now hissing under drizzle. The air that drifted off the river was briny and sweet. Inside the old houses, the wood swelled at the seams, pressing shutters against worn frames. Far across the dark expanse of the Savannah River, a tugboat horned twice, long and low. Officer Damon Whitaker moved through the sleeping city like a man who belonged to it and stood apart from it at the same time. His boots were careful on the slick brick, his shoulders bent under the honest fatigue of another endless shift. Damon was 38, lean and tall, built like someone who ran not for exercise but from habit. His close-cropped dark hair, kissed faintly with gray at the temples, was obedient even in the mist. His face carried the gentle creases of a man who smiled mostly for others' comfort and frowned only for his own. He had been raised across the river in Port Wentworth by a mother who worked at a public library and a stepfather who fixed shrimp boat engines and believed machines were more truthful than people, if only you learned their language. Damon carried that belief into police work. Machines. Patterns. Evidence. They didn't lie if you listened properly. But even the most solid doctrine wears thin with exhaustion. Tonight, his did. His shift had stretched long because of a goodbye that refused to end, a widow on River Street who needed someone in uniform to stand in her doorway until the locksmith could fix a lock that never quite caught. Damon had stayed patient, calm, until the new bolt clicked just right and the woman's shoulders dropped in relief. Now, at 1:13 a.m., he reached the live oak whose heavy branches arched protectively over his patrol sedan. Spanish moss hung like soft gray veils. Raindrops ticked on the hood, making halos in the shallow pools of light. He tugged his jacket tighter, leaned toward the door handle, and in that small movement, chin down, spine exposed, focus narrowed, something heavy and fast slipped from the dark behind him. It struck under his shoulder blade, a brutal, practiced hit that made the world flash white. His breath lost its rhythm. He turned instinctively, but another blow caught him low behind the knee, stealing his balance. A forearm pressed across his chest, neutral and efficient, folding his body back against the car. The trunk edge caught behind his thighs. He sat hard, breath burning. A pair of gloved hands worked with mechanical precision, no wasted motion, no anger, just a process. Zip ties rasped. Plastic bit. One loop closed around his wrists, another clamped his forearms, a third latched his ankles together. Then came the tape, wide, rubbery, torn from a roll with a sound that hissed louder than the rain. It sealed across his mouth, muffling the start of a protest. He breathed through his nose, steady, counting. In. Out. Anchor to the rhythm. Don't let panic bargain for your mind. The cabin smelled familiar, vinyl, disinfectant, and faint coffee, but beneath it lay a colder scent, synthetic gloves and peppered leather. The patrol radio blinked mutely, its battery half-seated. His attacker plucked it free, pocketed it, and replaced it with another, identical, but too clean. A twin that didn't belong. Damon saw the difference instantly. If someone swapped your second voice, they planned to speak as you. The car light clicked off. The whisper of rain returned, steady and merciless. The ends of the zip ties curled like tiny cruel smiles. Time warped the way it does when danger closes in, thin and stretched at once. He tested the bonds, not to break them, just to understand. The ties held tight. Plastic edges dug into his skin, carving shallow half-moons. His wrists burned, then numbed. He drew a long breath through his nose, flattening his pulse. No footsteps lingered now. Whoever had done this had left quickly, either confident he wouldn't escape or eager to watch from somewhere else. Damon lifted his eyes to the rearview mirror. The reflection showed only his own face, damp, steady. In his pupils, he caught a flicker of his mother's quiet bravery, his stepfather's rough hands on old engines. 1 minute at a time, he thought. Survive this minute, then the next. Something moved in the window frame, human-shaped but cautious, not looming. A figure stepped into the glow of the streetlight. Lean and rope-muscled under a soaked jacket, about mid-30s, a face drawn with experience rather than age. Evan Riker. He carried himself like someone who had already made peace with every kind of weather. A U.S. Marine once, molded by 2 tours overseas, and imprinted with the kind of discipline that lingers long after discharge. His shoulders were square but relaxed, his movements fluid and deliberate, like he didn't want to disturb the air. A straight nose, slightly off-center from an old break, a mouth balanced between humor and restraint, dark hair clipped close. His hazel-green eyes flickered with the kind of awareness that maps exits even in a conversation. People mistook that quiet composure for courage. To Evan, it was simply training, move toward the problem, understand it, solve it. A pale scar ran the length of his left forearm, memory of an engine fire years ago in Helmand. He could still recall the smell of scorched nylon every time the rain came heavy. He raised a hand to the glass, fingers spread in the universal gesture, "Don't startle, I'm here to help." Rain spattered his skin, turning the space between them electric. He didn't pull the handle right away. He just nodded once, a question and a promise combined. Damon held still in response. Then Evan opened the rear door, slow and silent. A second presence stepped into the night. The German Shepherd. 4 years old, black and tan, muscles sculpted under a harness dulled by dust and rain. Water beaded off his coat like polished stone. Every hair seemed alive. His name, stitched into the vest, Bravo. Bravo moved like a poem made of muscle, balanced between caution and courage. His almond eyes glimmered warm and wise, the brow furrowed in serious intent. A faint scar nicked the edge of his left ear, a notch from hurricane debris, giving him a permanently inquisitive tilt. Trained first for search and rescue, he'd become Evan's partner by fate more than assignment. Where Evan read lines and geometry, Bravo read air currents and heartbeat shifts. The dog placed both forepaws on the car's rocker panel, head tilted, nostrils flaring. He read Damon's fear in the invisible ways, cortisol in sweat, breath tempo, pulse under skin. He gave a soft huff, then turned to Evan, as if reporting the results. Evan nodded, crouching beside the door. He drew a folding blade, plain, functional, sharpened through use, and slipped it under Damon's bound ankles first. "Easy," he murmured, barely more than breath. The first tie parted with a whisper. The second, at the forearms, yielded next, cut cleanly without breaking skin. Bravo shifted closer, chest blocking the open door, ready to hold it against any sudden slam. The final tie at the wrists was cruelly tight. Evan paused, fingers brushing the swelling, gauging pressure points. For a moment his gaze went distant, remembering another night, another man caught in webbing, upside down after an explosion, sand and glass raining through the wreckage. He exhaled, steady. "On 3, he said softly, though both of them knew he wouldn't wait for consent. 1, 2, the blade angled, the plastic gave. Damon gasped through returning blood flow, nerves tingling awake. Evan peeled the tape next, slow and careful, not only for comfort, but because he understood how skin remembered violence. The strip tore away with a low growl, and Damon drew his first clear breath like a diver breaking surface. Evan's hand hovered, not touching, just stillness that said, "Don't speak yet." "They're listening," he warned, his tone flat but heavy with layered meaning. Damon's eyes flicked to the radio cradle and back. The truth landed clean. Someone was watching this moment through borrowed equipment. He nodded once. Gratitude could come later. For now, survival. He flexed his hands, pins and needles crawling. In the mirror, Bravo's head turned sharply, ears twitching toward the lot's far side. The dog's tail froze midair, muscles tightening. Evan followed that invisible line of tension. Footsteps, faint but deliberate. Not the uneven stumble of a drunk, not the easy stride of a late worker, measured steps. Watching steps. Evan whispered toward the space more than to Damon. "We keep our voices like secrets," he said. Then, with a dry half-smile, "and our hands where they're useful." He ghosted his fingers near the swapped radio but didn't touch. The trap was set too cleanly. Instead, he slipped something small into Damon's palm, the real radio battery. Sleight of hand learned from field medics and magicians alike. Damon cupped it close, the gesture instinctive. He finally managed a whisper. "You, Marine." "Was," Evan replied. The word was past tense, but it sat on him comfortably. Outside, Bravo rumbled deep in his chest, an ancient, steady warning that seemed to come from before words were invented. Evan rested 2 fingers on the dog's scruff. "Let him hear himself," he said quietly. "Let the watcher know there's something with teeth out here." Damon's wrists ached, but pain was proof of life. He pushed his shoulders back against the seat, boot testing the brake pedal. The machine responded true, still his. Evan's eyes swept the car in quick mechanical rhythm, door hinge, side mirror, frame, calculating lines of retreat. Then, leaning just close enough for his words to be private, he repeated, "They're listening. So keep your voice down." And outside, the rain whispered on. The moss swayed. Somewhere beyond the live oaks, a silent watcher decided what kind of night this would be. Damon decided only one thing. He would survive this minute. And then the next. Savannah's river exhaled mist into the dim hours before dawn, wrapping the streets in a silver hush. The drizzle had softened into a fine sheen across the cobblestones of River Street, turning every puddle into a mirror for the old gas lamps that flickered against the fog. The scent of brine mixed with tar and something faintly sweet, like magnolia petals beaten loose in last night's storm. Officer Damon Whitaker pulled his jacket close as he followed Evan Riker's lead through the quieter edge of the waterfront. Bravo padded between them, his paws nearly soundless against the stones. Evan walked like someone who had never stopped patrolling, his body automatically scanning angles, reading the rhythm of the night. Even in plain clothes, his stance carried military precision. Shoulders relaxed but centered, eyes moving constantly, weighing distance and cover. Damon's wrists throbbed where the zip ties had bitten deep, and though the cold numbed them some, the sting kept him grounded. What unsettled him more than pain was uncertainty, why he had been targeted, who had sent the attacker, and why the radio had been swapped. Every part of his training screamed that he should have called it in, filed a report, requested backup. But the same training also warned him that the first betrayal had come through his own equipment. The same system that was supposed to protect him had already been turned. They stopped beneath the drooping awning of a shuttered seafood shop. The tin roof clattered faintly where rain filtered through rusted holes. Bravo sat at Evan's side, perfectly still but alert, his eyes reflecting streetlight like molten amber. Evan leaned his shoulder against a post, rubbing absently at the scar along his forearm. "Warehouse on River Street," he said under his breath. "The one with the white paint peeling off in sheets. I used it for cover last week when the storm rolled through." His eyes flicked toward Damon. That's where I heard them. Damon frowned, brow tight. Heard who? They said your name, Evan replied. He studied Damon's reaction carefully before continuing. More than once. Damon's mouth went dry. You're sure? Evan nodded. Voices I knew. Bryce Langford's, 4-1. Damon froze. My lieutenant? And a woman, Evan added. Your admin clerk, Evelyn Kerr. Couldn't mistake her voice even through the rain. The names hit like hard stones dropped in water. Bryce Langford, his superior for 5 years, polished boots, dry humor, the kind of officer who quoted regulations and smiled for cameras. Evelyn Kerr, the meticulous administrator who never missed a detail and always seemed to appear at the right moment with a file or schedule. Evan's jaw flexed. They talked about you like a chess piece already moved off the board. Said Thursday was the night. Mentioned your habits, where you park, what routes you walk, how you never change your schedule. Whoever hit you tonight wasn't guessing. The drizzle thickened again, running cold down Damon's collar. That doesn't make sense, he muttered. Bryce writes me up for being too cautious. Evelyn, she brings coffee and cookies on Fridays. None of that adds up. Because you don't play their game, Evan said sharply. You follow the rules, and they need you gone. I heard it, clear as rain. Bryce said, remove him permanently. He paused, letting the words settle. They weren't talking about transfers. Damon stared at him, heartbeat hammering. Then this, tonight. Evan nodded once. The beginning. For a moment, neither man spoke. The sound of the rain filled the gap between them. Bravo's ears twitched toward the river as if listening to something unseen. I should report this, Damon said finally, his voice tight. Internal affairs, maybe the commissioner. No, Evan's tone was quiet but absolute. You radio this in, and you're done before sunrise. They said they've got someone scrubbing channels. Every call you make, every message, gets intercepted before it reaches a friendly ear. Damon wanted to argue, but Bravo suddenly pulled at the leash, nose low to the ground. The shepherd led them a few steps forward and stopped over a dark streak on the stones, an oily smear glistening in the light. Damon crouched. What is that? Evan knelt beside him, rubbing the slick between 2 fingers. Diesel, he murmured, then sniffed lightly. Mixed with refrigerant. A reefer truck's been here recently. Fish delivery? Damon asked. Evan shook his head. Not at 1 a.m., and not after the storm. His gaze sharpened. And they weren't talking seafood. I heard them mention an emergency clause. Something about shifting control of seized property. Damon's breath caught. That's a protocol phrase. It gives temporary authority to reassign confiscated goods during a crisis, hurricane, flood, whatever. His eyes narrowed. But it's rarely used. And without oversight, it's a black hole. Exactly, Evan said. They're moving something cold that isn't shrimp. And they needed you out of the way before Thursday. Damon stood slowly, the drizzle turning to mist around them. Every streetlight suddenly felt like a spotlight, every shadow a spy. He looked back toward his car parked under the oak, now an emblem of betrayal rather than safety. He wanted to believe Evan was mistaken. He wanted to believe in order and trust. But the bruise on his shoulder, the cuts on his wrists, and the swapped radio argued harder than faith. Evan met his eyes. You don't have to trust me yet, he said quietly. Just trust what you've seen. For now, keep your routine exactly the same. Let them think you're still blind. Bravo's low growl rolled from his chest, deep and warning. He stared down a narrow alley slick with rainwater. Something, or someone, was there. Evan laid a calming hand on the dog's vest. Easy, partner, he murmured. Not yet. Then to Damon, Thursday isn't far. And they're already counting the hours. The three of them stood in the wet quiet of River Street, officer, marine, and dog, while unseen eyes in the dark recalculated their next move. By the time they turned off River Street, the rain had softened again to mist. Steam rose from the manholes and street drains, curling like ghostly breath. Damon's body ached with fatigue, but adrenaline kept his senses sharp. They passed shuttered storefronts until a flickering red neon sign broke the gloom, Hattie's Grill, open late. Evan pushed through the door first, Bravo close behind. The diner smelled of coffee, grease, and fried eggs. Vinyl booths lined the wall, their edges cracked and faded from years of elbows. The air was warm, dense with the comfort of places that had seen too many confessions. At the back, a woman sat alone in a corner booth. She looked up at the sound of the door, blue-green eyes narrowing before softening. "Whitaker," she said, voice cool but edged with concern. "You look like hell. Sit down before you fall down." Detective Mara Quinn. She was 36, tall and strong in posture, her auburn hair loose for once instead of tied back, damp from the rain. She had the presence of someone who commanded a room without trying, a blend of discipline and quiet authority. Her colleagues had nicknamed her Cold Current because she could strip a lie to its bones in seconds. Damon froze at the sight of her, unprepared for memory to step out of the past in so ordinary a setting. She had been his training partner when he first joined the force, the one who taught him that compassion didn't mean softness, and that integrity came at a cost. Evan slid into the booth across from her, Bravo curling neatly at his feet. Damon followed, still wary. Mara's gaze shifted from Damon to Evan, assessing him in a heartbeat. "And this is?" "Evan Riker," the Marine said with a polite nod. His voice carried the steady weight of someone who didn't waste syllables. Her eyes flicked down to Bravo. "And the dog?" "Bravo," Damon said. "The one who saved my life about an hour ago." The waitress, a round woman with kind eyes and gray curls escaping her bun, appeared at their table with a coffee pot. "What'll it be?" she asked, pouring without waiting. Bravo's nose twitched at the scent of bacon sizzling in the back. The woman chuckled, wagging a finger. "This one looks like he knows more secrets than the mayor. Probably keeps them better, too." Damon gave a tired smile. For a fleeting second, the weight in his chest lifted. When the waitress left, Mara leaned forward, her tone all business. "All right. Start talking. Why do you look like you've been through a grinder?" Damon hesitated, glanced at Evan. The Marine gave a short nod, permission. So Damon told her everything. The ambush under the oak. The missing radio battery. The stranger who wasn't a stranger. The warehouse. The overheard conversation. The names Bryce Langford and Evelyn Kerr. When he finished, Mara's fingers tapped the side of her mug, the only sound between them. Her expression hardened. "I've been hearing whispers about them for months," she said quietly. "Nothing I could pin down. But this," she exhaled. "This connects too many dots." She pulled out her phone, thumb moving fast across the screen. Her brow furrowed. "Someone ran your license plate an hour ago," she said. "Not a logged check. Ghost query. No dispatcher tag." Damon's stomach nodded. "They're watching me already." "More than watching," Evan said. "They're testing you. Measuring your reaction." Bravo gave a low whine, leaning against Damon's knee as if reminding him to breathe. Damon reached down and scratched the dog's ear, grounding himself in that small, living warmth. Mara leaned in. "We keep the circle small. Just us. No one outside this booth hears a word, not your sergeant, not your commander, not even the janitor. If Bryce and Evelyn have their claws in the system, we can't trust anyone else." Damon nodded slowly. "Then what do we do?" Evan's reply was calm, practical. "We play dumb. You keep your routine, same routes, same schedule. Let them think you're still in their box. Meanwhile, we gather proof. Mara's mouth curved in a thin, fierce line. 3 of us, she said. And him. She nodded toward Bravo, who perked up at the sound of his name. That's it. No leaks. The waitress returned with plates, bacon, eggs, toast slick with butter. Bravo lifted his chin, nose twitching. Mara smirked and slid a strip of bacon down to him. Don't tell the health inspector. Bravo caught it delicately, chewing with solemn joy. Damon laughed, a brief, human sound breaking through the tension. For a heartbeat, the diner felt normal. But outside, the street steamed under the sodium lights, and the rain whispered its warning. Savannah might have slept, but the eyes watching from the dark never did. Thursday was coming. The mist thickened again by the time Damon Whitaker, Evan Riker, Mara Quinn, and Bravo left the dim glow of River Street. The cobblestones gave way to rougher asphalt as they followed the river's curve toward the industrial harbor. The air turned sharp, brine mingled with the tang of oil and rust. Ships moored at the docks loomed like dark giants, their ropes creaking under the pull of the tide. Mara led with quiet assurance, her eyes scanning every movement, every shape that didn't belong. Damon followed a step behind, alert but uneasy. The drizzle clung to his hair and collar. Somewhere deep in his chest, dread swelled, but he forced it down. Evan kept to the rear, the leash loose in his hand. Bravo moved between them, steady, deliberate, nose low, tail stiff with focus. The shepherd's harness glimmered faintly whenever the streetlight broke through the fog, a quiet heartbeat of LED light near his collar. They reached an old seafood warehouse crouched by the river, its once white walls now flaking to reveal rusted metal beneath. A chain-link gate leaned crooked on its hinges, rattling with each gust of wind. "This the one?" Damon whispered. Evan nodded, crouching beside the latch. "Salt's eaten half of it away," he murmured. "Give me a second." His calloused fingers probed along the frame until he found the corroded joint. A soft push, a lift, and the metal groaned faintly before yielding. They slipped inside one by one, their silhouettes swallowed by the dark. The air inside was colder, heavier. The smell hit first, stale fish, old motor oil, and disinfectant. It clung to the tongue like metallic dust. Above them, fluorescent lights buzzed with uneven rhythm, flickering like a weak pulse. Rows of wooden tables stretched down the center, some covered with sheets, others piled with crates stamped with faded numbers. A column of ledgers and invoices lay scattered across one corner, as though someone had left in a hurry. Mara moved toward the papers, flipping pages with gloved precision. Her focus was surgical. Damon hovered behind her, heart hammering. "Here," she breathed after a moment, eyes locking on one folder. "Fresh ink. Official header." She turned it toward him. Across the top, typed neatly, "Whitaker, Damon, activation of emergency clause." Damon's stomach lurched. The word swam before his eyes, transfer of evidence management authority. Removal from tactical field assignment. Immediate effect. "They're setting me up," he whispered, voice raw through the healing cut on his lip. Evan crouched beside a table leg, scanning the floor instead of the pages. His gaze was precise, dissecting details most would miss. A faint trail of wet print stretched toward the back of the room. He touched one. The tread pattern was shallow on the inner edge, deeper on the outer heel. "That gate," Mara murmured. "Bryce Langford. He drags his right foot just enough to scuff the edge. I'd recognize it anywhere." Damon felt his jaw tighten until it ached. Bryce wasn't just his superior, he'd been a mentor of sorts. A man Damon had trusted. And now his prints led straight through a scene designed to destroy him. Bravo shifted suddenly, his ears pricking, head turning toward the far end of the warehouse. His low growl rolled through the cold air, deep and resonant. "Someone's here," Evan whispered. He rose smoothly to a crouch, scanning the shadows. Steps, back corner, steady rhythm. Not panicked. Mara drew her pistol but kept it low. Damon reached instinctively for his own holster before remembering it was empty, his service weapon still locked in his car. Evan motioned for silence. No shots, he mouthed. Not here. He pressed his hand gently against Bravo's harness, sliding a finger beneath the inner seam. With a subtle click, he activated a tiny recording unit, barely larger than a thumb drive, hidden in the fabric. A soft vibration told him it was running. Let's make their trap work both ways, he whispered. The hum of the fluorescent lights wavered. Somewhere beyond the crates, a faint metallic scrape echoed. Mara gestured toward the exit. We move. Quietly. They weaved through the stacks of wooden crates, every sound magnified by the cavernous space. Damon's pulse thudded in his ears. He could feel eyes watching, waiting. At the gate, Bravo paused and did something startling. The shepherd pressed his flank against a half-open barrel, smearing his vest with fish oil and salt brine. The stench was sharp and immediate. Evan's lips curved faintly despite the tension. Good boy, he whispered. Mask your scent. Smart. Damon stared, momentarily distracted by awe. The dog didn't just follow orders, he understood them before they were given. They slipped back into the night. The warehouse door groaned shut behind them, muffling the echo of distant footsteps. Outside, the drizzle had turned to mist again. Steam curled from the storm drains, glowing under the lamps. The city looked almost asleep, but the danger hadn't lessened, it had simply changed its shape. Mara led them through narrow lanes until they reached the waterfront again. Damon's thoughts churned. He saw the folder's words every time he blinked. His own name written like a verdict. When they reached the shelter of an overhang, he finally spoke. We crossed a line tonight, he said quietly. There's no walking back from this. Evan met his gaze evenly. Then we keep moving forward. For a long moment, the only sound was the slow rhythm of rain against metal. Somewhere behind them, a door slammed. The city's pulse quickened again. Inside the warehouse they had left behind, a light flickered on. A silhouette moved through the stacks, unaware that a dog's vest now carried the truth that would unravel everything. Morning broke heavy and gray over Savannah. The streets gleamed wet from the night's rain, and the air smelled of salt, magnolia, and diesel. Damon Whitaker woke before dawn, unable to shake the restless churn of the night's discovery. The folder, his name printed neatly across the top, haunted his thoughts. He sat at the edge of the bed in his small apartment near the river, watching light creep across the blinds. His badge lay on the dresser, its reflection catching faint gold. For the first time since joining the force, it felt less like a shield and more like a target. His phone buzzed. He stared at the caller ID until his gut turned cold. Evelyn Kerr. He hesitated, then answered. Officer Whitaker, came her smooth, clipped voice. Minor change of plans. The meeting we scheduled for Thursday has been moved up. Wednesday evening, instead. Logistics require we finalize matters sooner. The tone left no space for agreement, just inevitability. She ended the call before he could respond. Damon sat frozen, the words replaying. Wednesday. Not Thursday. They were nervous. Evan Riker stood by the window, arms crossed, Bravo at his side. The Marine's expression was unreadable, but his eyes had sharpened. They're pushing up the timeline, he said quietly. Means they think you're closing in. Later that morning, the three of them met again at Hattie's diner. The rain had eased, leaving streaks on the fogged windows. Mara slid into the booth opposite Damon, her hair tied back this time, leather jacket zipped halfway. She looked as tired as he felt, but her eyes burned bright with focus. They're moving the meeting up to tonight, she said after hearing Damon's recap. Good. The more they rush, the more mistakes they make. She tapped her mug with a fingertip, thinking aloud. We'll use their confidence against them. Evan unfolded a napkin and drew rough lines with a pen he pulled from his pocket, a simple map of River Street. We keep his routine unchanged, he said. Same parking spot under the oak. Same shift time. They'll expect him to move like always. And we'll be watching, Mara added. Damon nodded slowly. His instincts told him to fight or run, but discipline kept him steady. So I walk straight into the same trap, he said quietly. And we flip it. Exactly, Evan replied. You don't fight a trap by avoiding it. You let them think it's working until it isn't. Bravo nudged Damon's knee with his nose, as if echoing the Marine's confidence. Damon smiled faintly and scratched behind the shepherd's ear. All right, partner, he said softly. But if we make it out alive, I owe you an entire pot of stew. Beef, chicken, lamb, you name it. Bravo's tail thumped once against the floor, a solemn pact sealed in silence. Evening came wrapped in mist. The air off the river was cool and heavy, carrying the creak of ship rigging and the clang of metal against hulls. They moved carefully, Evan in plain clothes, Mara leaning against a lamppost with feigned indifference, Damon near his patrol car parked in its usual spot under the oak. The scene looked ordinary. Familiar. That was the point. The drizzle returned, fine and slanting. Streetlights painted soft halos over the cobblestones. Damon pretended to scroll his phone, jaw tight but face calm. Evan crouched beside Bravo, running his hand slowly along the shepherd's back, whispering low. Then Bravo stiffened. The dog's muscles locked, ears pricking toward the far end of the street. His tail froze midair. Evan followed the gaze. Under a distant lamp stood a man in a long raincoat. Still. Watching. His face hidden beneath the hood, posture straight as if carved from the mist itself. Damon's pulse surged. Instinct said draw your weapon. Confront. Control the threat. But Evan's quiet voice cut through, no. Let him watch. He needs to believe we're unafraid. So they didn't move. Mara flipped her lighter open, shielding the flame from the drizzle like a casual smoker, though she never carried cigarettes. Damon leaned back against the car, appearing bored. Evan kept one hand on Bravo's vest, calm as stone. The figure didn't budge. The rain made ribbons across his coat, the light bending off wet fabric. Then a gust swept through, blurring everything in a sheet of silver. When the wind eased, the space beneath the lamp was empty. Damon exhaled. Mara's eyes met his across the street. The trap was baited. Someone had taken notice. The game had begun in earnest. The sky over Savannah was just beginning to pale when the drizzle finally eased. Water clung to the cobblestones in tiny mirrored pools, each one holding a fragment of the lamps above. The city felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for dawn to choose whether it would bring light or more shadows. Officer Damon Whitaker leaned against the hood of his patrol car, fatigue drawing lines under his eyes. He hadn't slept. Every sound, the wind, the sigh of passing tires, even the hum of refrigeration units along the pier, felt amplified, sharp enough to cut. Inside Hattie's diner, the world was smaller, quieter, wrapped in the smell of coffee and warm metal. In the back booth, Detective Mara Quinn sat with the German Shepherd's harness spread flat on the table. The morning light through the blinds cast faint bars across her face. She'd traded her leather jacket for a navy hoodie, hair tied in a messy knot at her neck. Years of working homicide had given her a rhythm for mornings like this, controlled, deliberate, where every second mattered. Her fingers, slim but practiced, traced the seams of the vest until she found the uneven stitch Evan had mentioned. Across from her, Evan Riker sat straight-backed, fatigue etched into the corners of his eyes but posture still soldier-straight. The Marine's calm never wavered, even tired, he radiated focus. Bravo lay at his feet, head resting on his paws, eyes half-closed but alert. Evan's low voice broke the silence. The recorder's simple, but effective. Battery's short life, maybe 12 hours. It'll hold what we need. Mara nodded, pulling a small knife from her pocket, the handle worn smooth from years of use. With a careful motion, she sliced the seam open, prying apart the layers of nylon. The fabric gave way to reveal a tiny device, black, no bigger than a thumb drive. Damon arrived as she lifted it into the light. His uniform was rumpled, his expression tight. He slid into the booth, palms pressed flat against the table. "You sure you want to hear this?" Mara asked. He didn't hesitate. "Play it." Evan pressed the button. Static crackled, then voices bled through, muffled at first, but distinct. Evelyn Kerr's smooth tone filled the air. "By Thursday night, he's done. Clean break." A pause. Then came Bryce Langford's low chuckle. "He won't even see it coming. Once it's signed, it's sealed." The three of them sat motionless. The hum of the diner's ceiling fan filled the space between words. Damon stared at the recorder as if it might burst into flames. Mara's jaw tightened. "That's enough to start an internal investigation," she said. "Not airtight yet, but close." Evan shook his head. "Listen again." He rewound a few seconds and let the audio run longer this time. More fragments surfaced between waves of static, phrases about emergency clauses, asset transfers, and cold storage inventory. The rest dissolved into interference, but the meaning was clear enough. Damon's throat tightened. He leaned back, pressing a hand over his eyes. "I worked with him for years," he said quietly. "Bryce was the guy who stayed late to finish reports. Who brought coffee when the shift went long." His hand dropped, and the anguish in his voice sharpened. "He was grooming me for replacement. Not promotion." Bravo whined softly, nudging Damon's leg. The dog's tail gave one low, sympathetic sweep. Evan looked up sharply. Bravo's ears had pricked, head lifting from his paws. His nostrils flared once, twice. Then came the faintest growl, low, uncertain, but warning. "Someone's close," Evan murmured. Mara didn't hesitate. She picked up the recorder, dropped it into an empty metal travel mug, and snapped the lid shut to mask the sound. "Move," she ordered under her breath. The footsteps came next, steady, deliberate, not a casual passerby. The rhythm was wrong for civilians and too methodical for a cop on patrol. Evan slid out of the booth, hand motioning them low. Mara stuffed Bravo's harness into a duffel and zipped it. They moved toward the back of the diner, where a narrow hallway led to an exit used by kitchen staff. Outside, the alley was slick with rainwater, lined with the low hum of refrigeration compressors. Evan raised a hand, signaling silence. "Step with the rhythm," he whispered. "Inhale shallow. Match the pulse." Damon frowned in confusion until he realized, the compressor's drone would cover their footsteps. He followed the Marine's lead, syncing his movements to the steady mechanical thrum. Mara did the same, her grip on the duffel firm. They slipped into the alley's mouth just as a figure appeared at the far end. A tall silhouette in a long raincoat. Head slightly tilted. The same figure who'd watched them last night from across the wharf. Damon's hand twitched toward his holster, but Mara pressed it down instantly. "Don't," she whispered. "He's not here to arrest. He's here to confirm." Evan's eyes locked on the man. Every muscle in his body coiled, ready, but he didn't move. His voice was barely audible. "Surveillance, not confrontation. If we spook him now, they'll burn everything before we can prove it." Damon's pulse hammered, but he nodded. They waited, silent shadows in the fog. The figure lingered a few seconds more, then turned away and vanished into the mist. Evan motioned them forward. They jogged the rest of the block until they reached his truck, parked under a cluster of dripping magnolia trees. Once inside, the doors shut with muffled finality. For a moment, no one spoke. Then all three exhaled at once, the air thick with adrenaline and cold breath. Mara was the first to recover. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving fast. "Uploading it," she said. "Off the device, onto a cloud server. My personal one. Not tied to department servers." Evan raised a brow. "You trust that line?" "I trust myself," she said curtly. "I've used it before, on a case that almost got buried." Damon stared out the windshield at the fogged glass, voice low. "So they know I'm alive. They know I'm not following orders. What now?" Evan rubbed the heel of his hand over his eyes, then looked up. "Now we stay ahead. You keep acting normal. Don't break routine. Let them think the plan's still unfolding. And we gather proof," Mara added. "More than recordings, paper trails, authorizations, signatures." Damon nodded slowly. The tension in his shoulders didn't ease, but his focus sharpened. "If I go down," he said, "it won't be quietly." Bravo shifted in the back seat, resting his chin on the armrest, eyes trained on Damon's reflection. The faint red glow from the dashboard flickered in his gaze like twin embers. Outside, the mist pressed against the windows. Somewhere down the street, a siren wailed briefly, then fell silent. They were running out of time. The next morning dawned deceptively calm. Savannah looked almost peaceful, streets rinsed clean, river glinting under pale sunlight. The air was cool, touched with the faint perfume of wet moss. But inside Damon's chest, storm clouds still gathered. He stood in front of his dresser, straightening his uniform collar. His hands trembled once, but he forced stillness back into them. His badge gleamed, newly polished, the reflection sharp as a blade. Beside him, Bravo sat attentively, his tail sweeping slow arcs on the floor. Damon crouched and scratched the shepherd's neck. "Stay close today," he murmured. "Whatever happens, we move together." Bravo blinked, pressing his head against Damon's palm, as if to seal the promise. Downstairs, Evan and Mara waited in the truck. The Marine looked like he hadn't slept at all, fatigue hung under his eyes, but his expression stayed calm. Mara wore a charcoal blazer and carried a slim folder under her arm. Her auburn hair was tied back tightly, every line of her body broadcasting determination. Evan glanced up as Damon and Bravo approached. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." They drove in silence toward the Savannah Police Department headquarters, a solid granite building fronted by wide steps and framed with live oaks. The sun caught in the Spanish moss, turning it gold for an instant. Inside, the corridor leading to the main conference chamber buzzed with voices. Officers and clerks passed briskly, unaware of the tension walking among them. Damon's boots clicked on the marble floor, echoing too loudly in his ears. Bravo walked beside him, matching each stride perfectly. Mara followed close, her file clutched tight. At the far end of the hall, double doors opened into the chamber. The smell of coffee and varnished wood hung heavy in the air. The Oversight Commissioner, Samuel Holt, sat at the head of the long mahogany table. Broad-shouldered, late 50s, his gray hair trimmed military short. His reputation was known across the department, incorruptible, the kind of man who had once turned down promotion to expose a superior's corruption. Across from him stood Lieutenant Bryce Langford, impeccable as always, his dark uniform pressed to perfection, ribbons lined like medals of virtue. Evelyn Kerr sat at his side, arranging binders into precise stacks. Bryce looked up as Damon entered. His smile was warm, practiced. "Officer Whitaker," he greeted smoothly. "Glad you could join us." Damon nodded once, taking the seat opposite him. Evan remained near the back wall, silent and unreadable. Mara took a place beside Damon, setting her folder down. Bryce began speaking with the confidence of someone who already believed he'd won. "Commissioner Holt, members of the board," he said, voice polished, "I'm here today to recommend an operational reassignment. Officer Whitaker's talents, while commendable, might be better utilized in a non-field position, logistics, perhaps. A safer, more suitable role. Evelyn passed neatly organized packets down the line, her smile serene. All data supports the transition, she said. Efficiency reports, performance metrics, updated assessments. Damon flipped through the pages. Every line twisted truth into something unrecognizable, phrases pulled from context, numbers skewed, his diligence recast as insubordination. He glanced at Mara. She gave a single nod. Damon stood, placing the small black recorder from Bravo's harness onto the table. The click of plastic against wood silenced the room. "Before this goes any further," he said, voice steady, "you need to hear something." The play button clicked. Static hissed. Then Evelyn's unmistakable voice filled the chamber, "By Thursday night, he's done. Clean break." Bryce's laugh followed. "He won't even see it coming. Once it's signed, it's sealed." The silence afterward was absolute. Evelyn's face went pale, but she didn't flinch. "That's out of context," she said quickly. "A private discussion about personnel restructuring." Poor phrasing, nothing more. Bryce's charm faltered. "Commissioner, this is clearly a misunderstanding." But Holt raised a hand. His gaze was sharp enough to cut steel. "What I hear," he said evenly, "is intent to deceive this board and manipulate official process. That alone constitutes misconduct." Mara slid a signed affidavit across the table. "Chain of custody verified," she said. "Recorder recovered at 0600. Copy uploaded to secure server." The commissioner reviewed it, then looked up, eyes narrowing. "Effective immediately," he declared, "Lieutenant Bryce Langford and Administrator Evelyn Kerr are suspended pending full investigation for abuse of authority and evidence tampering." The verdict fell like a hammer. Bryce's composure cracked, just slightly. Evelyn's lips tightened into a thin line, the perfect mask of a cornered strategist. Damon exhaled. His body sagged as the weight of days, of doubt, of betrayal, finally slipped from his shoulders. Beside him, Bravo pressed his head against Damon's thigh. Damon smiled faintly, running his hand through the dog's fur. "Good boy," he whispered. Across the room, Evan's stance softened for the first time since the night rain had bound them together. The storm outside had broken. But inside Savannah's precinct, a new dawn had begun. Evening rolled gently over Savannah like a soft gray tide. The storm that had shadowed the city for days was finally gone, leaving behind the clean scent of washed stone and river air. The streets shimmered faintly under the glow of old lamps, puddles catching the last blush of sunset. Damon Whitaker stood by the railing overlooking the river, his uniform jacket open to the breeze. Bravo sat beside him, calm and regal, watching a tugboat push slowly against the current. The quiet hum of engines mixed with the cry of distant gulls. The hearing had ended hours ago. Langford and Kerr were taken from the precinct under escort, no cuffs, not yet, but their eyes told the story of people who understood the world had tilted beneath them. Commissioner Holt's order for a full internal review had already set wheels in motion. Files would be opened, phones seized, and the soft, comfortable rot that had festered behind the department's polished veneer would be stripped bare. It should have felt like victory. But for Damon, it only felt like stillness after the crash. He reached down and brushed his hand over Bravo's neck. "We made it through," he murmured. "Didn't think we would, honestly." Bravo leaned into his touch, tail sweeping once against the damp wood of the pier. Footsteps approached from behind, steady, light. Damon didn't turn. He already knew the rhythm. Mara Quinn stopped beside him, a paper cup of coffee in one hand. "You look like someone who's been standing here a while," she said softly. "Maybe I was waiting for the river to explain how everything can move forward and stay the same," Damon said, a half-smile tugging at his lips. She handed him the cup. "Here. You'll get more answers from caffeine than water." He took it, the warmth seeping into his chilled hands. Thanks. Mara leaned against the railing beside him, eyes on the water. Holt's already cleaning house, she said. Half of Bryce's files were falsified. And Evelyn? She's talking. The DA's office called me an hour ago, she's flipping in exchange for leniency. Damon gave a humorless chuckle. Didn't take long. She's smart enough to know when a ship's sinking, Mara said. Then, more quietly, you did good, Whitaker. Most people would have gone under before this broke. He sipped the coffee, letting the heat settle his thoughts. I had help, he said simply. Mara smiled faintly. You always did. From the other side of the street, Evan Riker appeared, jacket zipped, posture still carrying that military sharpness, though his eyes had softened. He approached quietly, giving a brief nod to both. Bravo stood immediately, tail wagging, and pressed his head against the Marine's leg. Good to see you both in one piece, Evan said. Mara's lips curved. Barely, but we'll take it. Evan looked out over the river. Holt asked me to stay on for a few weeks. Consult on the internal review, help them patch holes in protocol. Damon raised a brow. You taking it? I think I will, Evan replied. Bravo deserves a few days where the only explosions are fireworks from a festival, not gunfire. At the mention of his name, Bravo gave a small huff, tail wagging again. Mara's gaze softened. He's something special, she said. Evan smiled, a rare and quiet thing. Saved more lives than most of us combined. Including mine. For a long moment, they stood in companionable silence, the three of them and the dog, bound by nights of fear and faith. The river moved endlessly below, carrying away the reflections of the lamps. Damon broke the quiet first. You ever think about how it started? One whisper, one lie, and suddenly everything shifts. Mara nodded. Corruption never starts loud. It begins with silence, someone looking away when they shouldn't. Evan's voice was low, almost a growl. Then someone else decides they can make it louder. Damon glanced at them both, thoughtful. You think that's what we did? Mara smiled faintly. No, she said. We didn't make noise. We brought the silence to an end. Later that night, Damon drove back toward the warehouse on River Street. It was sealed now, yellow tape fluttering weakly in the night wind. The doors were padlocked, the windows boarded. But the smell lingered, salt, oil, decay, and memory. He parked a short distance away and stepped out. The city was quiet. Only the faint hum of ships and the whisper of wind filled the space. Bravo padded beside him, nose twitching, tail low. Damon crouched and rested a hand on the shepherd's head. This is where it all started, he said softly. Seems smaller now. Bravo's ears flicked forward, eyes sharp as amber glass. I thought I'd lost everything that night, Damon continued. Turns out I was just losing the parts that didn't deserve to stay. The words hung in the air, honest and unforced. He stood and took one last look at the warehouse. Then he turned away. The next morning, Savannah awoke to sunlight. Real sunlight, the kind that painted gold across the river and made the windows blaze. The storm smell was gone, replaced by cut grass and morning pastries from bakeries opening along Bay Street. At Hattie's diner, the same waitress from earlier days was already pouring coffee. You all survived, huh? She said when Damon, Mara, and Evan walked in. Barely, Mara replied, sliding into the booth with a tired smile. Evan followed, Bravo settling at his feet. The dog's ears twitched toward the kitchen where the sizzle of bacon sang like promise. The waitress chuckled. He remembers, don't he? Better than most people, Damon said, smiling. Plates arrived, eggs, toast, bacon, and a stack of pancakes Damon hadn't ordered but didn't question. They ate in easy quiet, the kind of silence earned, not forced. Between bites, Mara asked, so what happens now? Evan wiped his hands, thinking. I'll stay through the audit. Then maybe head back to Quantico. Training division's been asking for a field consultant. Figure I owe the Corps a few stories. Damon nodded. And Bravo? Evan looked down at the shepherd, whose muzzle rested on his boot. He goes where I go. Always has. Mara tilted her head, smiling faintly. You two are like mirror halves, one breathes in, the other breathes out. Evan chuckled quietly. That's about right. Damon leaned back, watching them both. You know, he said, before this, I thought the job was just about serving the law. Turns out it's more about guarding the truth, and sometimes from the law itself. Mara looked up, eyes thoughtful. Truth's heavier than justice. But it doesn't sink as easily. Bravo's ears perked as if agreeing. Evan smiled. Then here's to keeping it afloat. He raised his coffee cup. The others followed. To truth, Mara said. To loyalty, Damon added. Bravo barked once, loud and clear, burning laughter from the entire diner. When they stepped back outside, the day had turned brilliant. Sunlight spilled over the rooftops, catching in the oaks. River Street buzzed with life again, tourists, vendors, artists setting up easels by the railings. Mara glanced at her watch. I've got paperwork to file and a dozen calls to return. You two coming? Evan shook his head. We'll catch up later. Got something to check first. She nodded, understanding. Don't disappear too long, she said, then headed off toward her car. Damon and Evan walked side by side toward the water. Bravo trotted between them, tail swinging. You ever think of staying? Damon asked. Evan smiled slightly. Maybe. Savannah grows on you. Quiet places usually do. They reached the pier where the river met the open current. The wind shifted, bringing with it the clean scent of salt and sun. Damon leaned against the railing, the same spot where it had all begun to unravel nights before. Funny, he said softly. I used to think the badge was the whole measure of a man. Now I know it's what you do when no one's watching that counts. Evan nodded. Badges fade. Actions echo. They stood in silence, letting the city's rhythm fill the space between words. Bravo barked suddenly, breaking the stillness. He had spotted a group of children tossing bread to gulls near the next dock. His tail wagged furiously, and he looked back at the two men expectantly. Evan laughed, a sound rare and unguarded. Go on, then, he said. The shepherd bounded off, his paws splashing through shallow puddles, joy unrestrained. The children squealed in delight, tossing more bits of bread as Bravo danced among them like sunlight come to life. Damon watched, smiling. You think he ever forgets the hard stuff? Evan shook his head. No. He just carries it differently. He turns it into purpose. Damon's eyes followed the shepherd. Maybe that's what we all need to learn. Evan clapped a hand on his shoulder. You already have. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of amber and rose, the river caught every color like molten glass. The gulls wheeled above, their cries fading into distance. Damon turned to go, his steps lighter than they had been in weeks. Evan followed, Bravo bounding up to walk between them again, soaked paws leaving trails across the boards. The city stretched before them, new, uncertain, but open. Some battles ended in the dark. Others ended here, in quiet light, with no headlines, no applause, just the knowledge that something wrong had been righted, and that those who had stood together still walked forward. As they reached the end of the pier, Damon looked back one last time. The wind tugged at his jacket, the sun burning the last gold edge of the horizon. He smiled. Come on, partner, he said softly to Bravo. Time to head home. Bravo gave a short, approving bark, as if to say the same. Together, Marine, officer, and shepherd, they walked into the golden dusk, the river whispering against the stones below. The storm had passed. The truth had not. 2 weeks passed. Savannah exhaled. The storms that had once hammered the coast had drifted far out to sea, replaced by calm mornings and amber evenings. The air grew soft again, heavy with magnolia and river mist. The city had gone back to its quiet rhythms, tourists snapping photos on River Street, vendors setting up their carts, children chasing gulls through the squares. But inside the Savannah Police Department, the air was different. Lighter in some ways. Heavier in others. The inquiry had unearthed more than anyone expected, layers of falsified records, redirected funds, and covert authorizations hidden behind the language of emergency protocols. Bryce Langford and Evelyn Kerr had been only the most visible faces. The rot had roots. Commissioner Holt had moved fast. Internal affairs swept through the precinct with a thoroughness that rattled even the most seasoned officers. Files were rechecked, digital logs reconstructed, and every department head was called into review. Several resignations came quietly overnight, a few arrests came noisily the next morning. And through it all, Damon Whitaker kept his head down and his focus steady. He wasn't chasing glory. He'd had enough of that illusion. What mattered now was rebuilding something honest, something that wouldn't break under the same weight again. On a crisp Thursday morning, he stood outside the precinct, watching the sunlight strike the building's granite face. The badge on his chest gleamed brighter than he remembered. Mara Quinn appeared beside him, a folder tucked beneath her arm. "You've been standing here for 10 minutes, she said. Damon smiled faintly. "Maybe I just like seeing it in daylight for once." She followed his gaze. "It looks better now. Feels different, too," he said. "Like we finally stopped holding our breath." Mara opened the folder and handed it to him. "Commissioner Holt asked me to deliver this. Official notice, your suspension review is closed. You're reinstated fully. Rank and privileges restored." Damon took the folder, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "You went to bat for me, didn't you?" "I nudged the right doors," she said, shrugging lightly. "Holt did the rest." He smiled, then sobered. "And Bryce?" "Still in holding. Trial scheduled for next month. Evelyn's cooperation shaved her time, but she'll still serve years. The others, well, they'll answer for their parts." Damon nodded slowly. "Good." Mara studied him a moment, then asked, "You thinking of taking some time off?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I'll finally fix that leaky roof I've been ignoring since spring." Her lips quirked. "Thrilling retirement plan. Safer than the last few weeks." She chuckled softly, then reached into her pocket and produced a slim, black memory card. "By the way," she said. "Your friend left this for you." He frowned, taking it. "Evan?" She nodded. "Said to tell you he's heading north for a bit. Quantico, probably. Training Division accepted his request." Damon turned the card over in his hand. "He just left?" Mara's tone softened. "He's not the kind who stays long. Says he's better at building others for the fight than standing still." Damon smiled faintly. "That sounds like him." Mara hesitated. "He also said something else." "What's that?" She looked out toward the street, sunlight catching her hair. "He said you'll know when to play it." That evening, Damon drove down to the river. The sky was painted in muted gold and soft blue, clouds stretching thin across the horizon. The water caught the light like molten glass. Bravo sat in the passenger seat, head out the window, ears flapping in the wind. The dog barked once, sharp with excitement, when they turned onto the familiar pier. They parked near the same railing where it had all begun, the night of the ambush, the whispers in the fog. Now the air smelled clean again, filled with salt and freedom. Damon sat on the hood of his car, laptop open beside him. He inserted the memory card Evan had left. The screen flickered once, then opened a single file, for Whitaker. He clicked. The video was simple, no production, no polish. Just Evan sitting at a wooden table somewhere dimly lit, Bravo lying behind him with his head on his paws. "Guess if you're seeing this," Evan began, his voice steady, "I've already left Savannah." He smiled faintly, that rare, quiet smile. Didn't want to make a big deal of it. Marines aren't built for long goodbyes. He paused, eyes lowering for a moment. "You did good, Whitaker. Better than most. You held the line when it counted. That's all this job ever really asks." Bravo's tail thumped once behind him in the recording. Evan chuckled. "Yeah, he agrees." He leaned closer to the camera. "Listen, I don't know where you go from here. Maybe you stay on the force. Maybe you don't. Either way, remember this, truth doesn't shout. It waits. Sometimes for years. But it always finds a way through. You prove that." Evan's gaze softened. "Take care of yourself, and take care of him." He glanced back at Bravo in the background. "He's earned more peace than I ever gave him." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Semper Fi, brother." The video ended. Damon sat still for a long time, the sound of the river folding gently around him. The screen dimmed, reflecting his own face, tired, but lighter. He reached down and scratched Bravo's neck. "He's right, you know," he said softly. "You earned this peace." Bravo leaned against him, pressing close. The world around them was quiet except for the faint slap of water against the docks and the distant horns of ships turning upriver. Days turned into weeks, and Savannah found its rhythm again. The department stabilized. Commissioner Holt's reforms took root, body cam data went through triple review, anonymous oversight committees formed, and internal protocols were rewritten from the ground up. The officers who stayed were the ones who still believed in the job. Damon returned to active duty but refused any promotion. He didn't want a desk. He wanted streets, noise, and the steady beat of patrol life. He wanted to see the city's heart from the ground again, not from behind glass. Bravo became something of a legend around the precinct. The K-9 unit gave him honorary certification, and every new recruit learned the story of the shepherd who exposed corruption without ever saying a word. Kids from local schools came to visit, and Damon caught himself smiling more than he used to. One afternoon, Mara stopped by his patrol car while he was finishing reports. She leaned on the open window. "Got a call from Washington," she said. "They're starting a task force, joint unit, internal affairs and federal liaison. They're asking for me." He looked up. "You taking it?" She hesitated. "I think so. Feels like the right fight." He nodded. "Then go win it." She smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. "You'll be fine here." He looked at Bravo sitting in the passenger seat, head cocked, eyes bright. "Yeah," he said. "I've got backup." Mara laughed softly. "Take care of yourself, Whitaker." "You too, Quinn." She tapped the roof twice, then walked off down the sidewalk. For a while, Damon watched her go, until her silhouette disappeared around the corner. Then he started the engine and pulled out into the flow of evening traffic. That night, the city glittered again, soft lamplight over the river, neon signs flickering to life, music spilling faintly from distant bars. Savannah had scars now, but they were the kind that healed with time, leaving behind the shape of something stronger. Damon parked near the riverfront and let Bravo hop out. The shepherd trotted ahead, nose twitching, tail high. They walked the familiar path along the water. Couples strolled nearby, laughter drifting through the air. A busker played slow guitar under a street lamp, his hat on the ground collecting coins. Damon stopped beside him, listened for a moment, then dropped a folded bill into the hat. The musician nodded, eyes crinkling in thanks. As they continued, Bravo veered toward a group of children feeding ducks. One little girl giggled as the shepherd approached, his tail wagging in slow rhythm. She reached out tentatively, and Damon gave a nod. Bravo leaned down gently, letting her scratch behind his ear. The laughter that followed was bright, unfiltered, the kind of sound that washes clean everything that came before. When they finally reached the end of the pier, Damon leaned on the railing again, looking out across the glowing water. The night air was cool, carrying the taste of salt. The city lights shimmered in ripples, and somewhere far off, thunder murmured, not a storm, just weather moving somewhere else. He spoke softly, almost to himself. Funny thing about storms, they end. You think they won't, but they do. And when they do, the quiet doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. Bravo pressed against his leg, and Damon smiled. Come on, partner. Let's go home. They turned back toward the street. The sound of the river followed them like memory, steady, constant, alive. Behind them, the last light of day faded into the horizon, and for the first time in a long while, Savannah slept without fear. Quantico, Virginia. 4 months later. The training compound stretched under a sky the color of cold steel, dotted with low-hanging clouds. The wind carried the scent of pine and wet earth, sweeping across rows of recruits running drills on the obstacle course. Voices echoed, cadence counts, the sharp bark of orders, the rhythmic thud of boots against mud. From a distance, it looked like any other morning. But near the perimeter fence, a lone figure stood watching, hands clasped behind his back. Evan Riker had traded the field for the classroom, but the soldier in him hadn't changed. His posture remained precise, his movements deliberate. A faint smile ghosted across his face as a recruit stumbled over a beam and scrambled to his feet again. Better, Evan called. Pain means you're learning. The young man grinned through grit, saluted, and kept moving. Evan watched for a moment longer, then turned toward the main building. Inside, the corridors smelled of chalk dust, coffee, and gun oil, a blend of order and fatigue. He passed through the instructor's wing and entered his small office overlooking the range. On the wall hung a framed photo of Bravo, ears alert, eyes bright, the picture taken by a Savannah journalist after the hearings. Beneath it was a simple brass tag engraved with 2 words, faith earned. Evan's new life was quiet. Structured. The kind of rhythm that gave a man space to think, but not enough to drift. Bravo lay at his feet, graying slightly at the muzzle, but still sharp, still proud. He lifted his head as Evan sat behind the desk. Morning, partner, Evan said, reaching down to scratch behind the dog's ear. Guess it's you and me again. Bravo licked his hand, tail thumping once. A knock came at the door. Evan looked up. A courier in standard fatigue stood there, holding a small envelope. Delivery for you, sir. Came through the base gate this morning. Evan took it, nodded thanks, and waited until the door closed again before turning the envelope over. The handwriting across the front was familiar, strong, neat, deliberate. Damon Whitaker. He smiled faintly and opened it. Inside was a short letter, handwritten in blue ink. Evan. Savannah's quiet again. Holt's reform stuck, at least for now. The precinct runs clean. The rookies ask more questions than they used to, and that's a good thing. Mara took the federal post. She sends word sometimes, mostly reports, sometimes just pictures of cities she's helping clean up. You'd like her team. They don't bend easy. As for me, I'm still here. Still on patrol. Bravo's story turned him into a local hero. There's a mural of him now on the side of Hattie's diner. The kids leave flowers and treats at the base every weekend. I tell them the real hero prefers steak. I watched the last storm roll through the coast a few nights ago. Lightning over the river looked like the sky trying to rewrite itself. And I thought about that night, the one where everything fell apart. About how sometimes you need the dark to see what's worth the light. You were right, Evan. Truth doesn't shout. But it never dies quiet, either. If you ever head back this way, the river's waiting. And so are we. Damon. P.S. Bravo's portrait still makes me look like I did all the work. Evan chuckled softly, folding the letter back into its envelope. He always did have a way with words, he murmured. He looked at Bravo, who thumped his tail again. You hear that? You're famous now. A mural. Probably taller than me. Bravo huffed, resting his chin on Evan's boot. Evan leaned back, eyes tracing the horizon outside his window. The rain had started, a soft, steady drizzle that painted the glass in silver threads. It reminded him of Savannah, of the mist curling over River Street, of the sound of the tide against the dock. He reached for a pen and a blank notepad, then began to write. Damon. Got your letter. Sounds like Savannah's learning to breathe again. That's good. Cities are like people, they heal best when they're seen for what they are, scars and all. Tell Holt he's got a rare thing, a department that finally believes in its own reflection. And tell Mara the next time she's in Quantico, the coffee's on me. As for that mural, don't let it go to Bravo's head. He already thinks he's the senior officer. We're doing well here. Training's hard, but it's clean. No politics, no smoke. Just young recruits who still believe in duty for its own sake. They remind me of you before the storm, steady, stubborn, honest to a fault. Sometimes, I miss the noise. The city. The mess of it all. But I think we both learned what we needed to from that place. If the river ever calls, you know where to find me. Semper Fi. Evan. He folded the note neatly and slipped it into an envelope. Bravo watched as he sealed it and placed it on the desk. Maybe we'll deliver it ourselves someday, Evan said softly. After all, some messages deserve a handshake, not postage. Bravo barked once, low and approving. Outside, the rain cleared. The recruits' voices rose again across the range, echoing through the pine trees. Evan stood, slipping on his jacket, and whistled once. Bravo rose immediately, ready as ever. They stepped outside into the damp air. The clouds were breaking apart, streaks of pale blue showing through. Evan paused, breathing it in. For the first time in years, the world felt balanced, not perfect, not without ghosts, but steady in its own way. Savannah, 3 months later. The mural of Bravo covered the side of Hattie's diner. Painted in rich color, it showed the shepherd mid-stride, strong, watchful, eternal. Below it, someone had added a small plaque, for those who listen when others stay silent. The diner had become something of a landmark. Tourists took photos, locals brought coffee to sit and talk. But for Damon, it was still the same place where long nights began and ended. That morning, the bell above the door jingled as he walked in. The same waitress waved. "Morning, Officer Whitaker. You bringing the Star today?" He smiled. "He's guarding the car. Thinks he owns the front seat." She laughed. "Can't blame him. He earned it." He took his usual booth near the window. The sunlight spilled in warm bands across the table. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Mara's voice broke his thought. "You planning to stare out the window all morning, or can I sit?" He looked up, startled, then grinned. "Didn't expect you back this soon." She slid into the booth, her blazer crisp, hair shorter now. "Conference in Atlanta. Thought I'd detour." "Welcome home," he said. They talked over coffee, about the task force, about the reforms, about the way cities could both break and rebuild themselves. Somewhere in the middle of it, laughter returned, the easy kind that had been missing for too long. When they finally stepped outside, the mural glowed gold in the morning light. Damon looked at it, thoughtful. He still doesn't know he's famous. "Maybe that's why he deserves to be," Mara said quietly. A car horn sounded from the street. Damon turned, and froze. Evan's truck. It pulled to a stop beside the curb, clean but travel-worn. Evan stepped out, wearing his familiar half-smile. Bravo leaped from the passenger seat, bounding toward Damon in an explosion of joy. "Guess Quantico got boring," Evan said. Damon laughed, kneeling to meet the dog's enthusiastic greeting. "Or maybe you missed the coffee." Evan shrugged. "Maybe both." Mara crossed her arms, smiling. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" "Didn't plan to," he said. "But there's a storm coming through the coast. Thought I'd see it from the right side of history this time." They all laughed softly. The kind of laughter born from survival, from shared scars. That evening, the three of them sat by the river again. The sky turned violet, then deep indigo. The air was cool, filled with the scent of wet stone and salt. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Evan tossed a small stone into the water. "You ever wonder," he said, "if we'd still have found each other without all that mess?" Damon thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Storms don't create character, they reveal it. Maybe that's what this was. Just a revelation." Mara sipped her coffee, watching the river roll. "And what did we find?" Evan smiled faintly. "That the world's still worth fighting for. Even when it doesn't fight fair." Bravo barked once, sharp and certain, as if seconding the sentiment. The three of them sat in quiet after that, watching the lights shimmer on the water. The city pulsed behind them, alive and unafraid. Somewhere, a ship's horn called, a long, low note that seemed to echo every heartbeat that had brought them here. Evan stood, stretching. "Well," he said, "I think this time, we can let the river handle the rest." Damon rose beside him. "Yeah," he said. "It's earned it." Bravo circled once, then sat between them, eyes glowing in the soft lamplight. The wind off the water carried their silence away, spreading it across the river, gentle, resolute, endless. The storm was long gone. But its memory had given them all something far greater than peace. It had given them purpose. 6 months later. Savannah had settled into spring again, the kind of season that carried sunlight in its pockets and scattered it generously across the city. The river gleamed beneath the morning sky, and the trees along the squares wore crowns of green. Markets buzzed with vendors selling flowers and fruit, and somewhere down River Street, a musician strummed a guitar that carried over the breeze like memory. Officer Damon Whitaker stood beside his patrol car, adjusting the new badge pin to his uniform. It wasn't a promotion, not exactly, more of a reassignment. Commissioner Holt had insisted on it. The department was restructuring under new ethics directives, and Damon was now lead field officer for community outreach, a title that sounded neat and administrative, but in practice meant he went where the city needed a steady hand. He liked it that way. It meant less time behind a desk and more time in the streets where truth still had dirt under its nails. Bravo waited at his side, tail gently sweeping the pavement. The shepherd was older now, grayer around the muzzle, slower on steps, but his eyes burned with the same alert intelligence. Kids still stopped him on patrol to pet his fur, and merchants still left bones wrapped in napkins outside their shops. In Savannah, Bravo wasn't just a hero. He was part of the city's pulse. As Damon clipped the leash to the harness, the dog looked up expectantly. "All right, partner," Damon said with a smile. "Let's earn our breakfast." They set off through the old quarter, the streets gleaming under the soft warmth of morning. The scent of pastries from Hattie's drifted downwind, and Damon caught himself chuckling. "You're already thinking about that bacon, aren't you?" Bravo's ears twitched, confirming it. Half an hour later, they reached the diner. The mural on its side had grown even brighter since winter, retouched by local artists after the mayor declared it an official landmark. Under Bravo's painted gaze, the plaque now bore another line etched beneath the first: "Courage doesn't bark, it stands its ground." Inside, the diner hummed with morning life. Mara Quinn sat in her usual corner booth, back to the wall, coffee steaming in front of her. She'd returned to Savannah 2 weeks ago, temporarily, she claimed, though the way her eyes softened whenever she looked at the river suggested she wasn't in a hurry to leave. "Detective Quinn," Damon said as he slid into the booth opposite her. "You're early." "I could say the same," she replied. "Though with you, I assume Bravo runs the schedule." "Always." Damon glanced toward the counter, where the waitress was already pulling out a plate. "He's got seniority around here." The waitress set the dish down with a grin. "And as usual, one side of bacon for the officer, and one for the four-legged legend." Bravo woofed softly in gratitude. As Damon broke his toast, Mara slid a thin folder across the table. "Updates from DC," she said. "Task force expansion. Holt's reforms down here got national attention. The Bureau's using Savannah as a model for ethical restructuring." "Never thought we'd end up as a case study," Damon said. Mara smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised how many departments are watching. Turns out exposing corruption without a body count makes for good press." He raised an eyebrow. "You still keeping count?" "Always." She sipped her coffee, studying him. "You look lighter." "Maybe I finally slept through the night," Damon said. "Or maybe you finally believe it's over," she countered. He smiled, not denying it. "Mostly." They ate in easy quiet for a while. The diner windows glowed with sunlight, throwing gold lines across the table. Outside, the mural's colors shimmered, Bravo forever immortalized in motion, his painted eyes fixed toward the river as if still guarding it. When breakfast ended, Mara closed her folder and rose. "Meeting Holt in 20. He wants to finalize policy changes before the next audit." "Tell him to keep the coffee strong," Damon said, standing. "He'll need it." She smirked, adjusting her blazer. "See you tonight at the waterfront?" Evan's message said he's flying in. Damon's face brightened. "No kidding." His words, "Quantico can wait. Savannah owes me a sunset." Damon laughed. That sounds exactly like him. The evening came soft and golden, spreading like honey across the river. Evan Riker arrived just as the sun touched the horizon. He looked almost the same, strong shoulders, steady eyes, but there was a peace in him that hadn't been there before. Time had worn away the sharp edges, leaving something calmer, wiser. Bravo spotted him before Damon did. The dog barked once, tail wagging furiously, and bounded across the pier. Evan crouched, arms open. "There's my hero," he said, laughing as Bravo leaned against him, tail sweeping the boards. "Still keeping the city honest?" "Every day," Damon said, walking up with a grin. "You look good, Riker." "Retirement suits me," Evan replied. "Or maybe it's just the absence of gunfire." Mara joined them, a paper cup of coffee in hand. "Welcome back, Marine. Savannah's quieter without you." "I'll take that as a compliment." He stood, brushing a bit of dog fur from his sleeve. "Thought I'd see how the river's holding up." "Still moves," Damon said. "Just slower now." They walked along the pier as the sky turned orange and violet. Ships drifted in the distance, their silhouettes sharp against the dying light. The air was soft and alive, the kind of evening that made time slow its pace. Evan leaned on the railing, looking out across the water. "Funny thing about places like this," he said quietly. "They hold on to ghosts, but they don't let them haunt you. They just remind you who you've been." Mara nodded. "That's what healing looks like. Not forgetting, remembering without bleeding." Damon looked between them, the faintest smile tugging his lips. "You two should write a philosophy book." "Already did," Mara said dryly. "It's called Survive and File Paperwork." They laughed softly, and for a moment, the world felt entirely at peace. Bravo lay at their feet, head resting on his paws, eyes fixed on the rippling reflection of the sunset. The light caught in his fur, turning it bronze. After a long pause, Damon said, "You ever think about what comes next?" Evan glanced at him. "For who?" "For all of us." Evan thought for a moment. "I think," he said, "we stop running from the noise. We build something better because of it." Mara tilted her head. "You mean rebuild the system?" "I mean rebuild ourselves," Evan said. "System's just a reflection. You fix the mirror by fixing the faces it shows." Damon nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's what all this was for." They stood in silence after that, listening to the slow song of the water. Somewhere nearby, a jazz band had started to play from a riverboat, the notes carrying across the air like lazy fireflies. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Savannah glowed with lamplight, soft, golden, alive. Later that night, Damon returned home. His small apartment above the old quarter had changed little since winter, though now a framed photograph hung by the door, Evan, Mara, and himself standing by the river, Bravo between them, tongue out, all three humans laughing. He sat at the table by the window, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. Bravo lay nearby, curled in quiet sleep. Outside, the city murmured, the soft hum of tires, distant laughter, a saxophone echoing through the night. Damon opened a notebook, his personal journal, something he hadn't touched since before the storm. The first pages were filled with restless handwriting, notes about fear, confusion, betrayal. But tonight, he turned to a clean page. He wrote, "Peace isn't silence. It's the sound of truth finally being heard." He paused, watching the ink dry, then added, "You can't undo the storm, but you can build a stronger shore." For a long while, he just sat there, listening to the rhythm of the city outside. When the clock ticked past midnight, Bravo stirred, lifting his head. Damon smiled. "Go back to sleep, partner. We've earned the quiet." The shepherd sighed contentedly and settled again. Damon looked once more out the window at the glowing skyline, the moonlight shimmering over the river, and whispered, "We did good." Weeks turned into months. Savannah's story spread beyond its borders, documentaries, reports, interviews. People called it the River Light case, though Damon hated the title. To him, it was never a story about scandal. It was about endurance. About choosing honesty when deceit was easier. Bravo's mural became a gathering place, officers meeting there before shifts, locals bringing their kids on weekends. Sometimes Damon caught tourists reading the plaque aloud, and every time, he felt something in his chest steady itself. Mara eventually returned to DC, but she called often. Evan sent postcards from every training base he visited. Damon pinned them to his wall, snapshots of deserts, mountains, forests, each with a single phrase at the bottom, "Still holding the line." And on quiet evenings, when the city's hum softened and the wind moved just right, Damon could almost hear their voices again, the low rhythm of conversation, the laughter beneath the noise, the faint bark that cut through the fog that night when everything changed. He'd look at Bravo then, older but still proud, and say, "You remember, don't you?" The shepherd would lift his head, ears twitching, and give one low bark, soft, knowing. "Yeah," Damon would murmur. "Me too." The river went on flowing, indifferent and eternal. The storms came and went, as they always did. But every dawn that broke over Savannah carried a quiet kind of promise, that truth, once uncovered, doesn't fade. It ripples outward, carried by those willing to stand when others run. And so it was that a Marine, a detective, and a police officer found themselves bound not by duty alone, but by what survived after it. Not glory. Not fame. Just the simple, steady rhythm of right. 3 years later. Savannah had grown, yet somehow stayed the same. The cobblestone still caught the morning light, the Spanish moss still swayed from the oaks like faded lace, and the river still whispered its endless song. But time had given everything a softer edge, like the city itself had learned how to breathe again. Officer Damon Whitaker parked his truck near the old pier just as the first blush of dawn touched the water. The air was cool, touched with the scent of salt and magnolia. He sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the quiet hum of the city waking up. A gray muzzle appeared between the seats. "Yeah, I know," Damon said with a smile, glancing at Bravo in the rearview mirror. "You're impatient as ever." The German shepherd tilted his head, eyes still bright though clouded with age. Damon reached back, scratching behind his ear before opening the door. "Come on, partner. Let's go see the morning." Bravo jumped down, a little slower than before but with the same dignity. His harness was newer, but the old tags still hung from the side, one bearing the Savannah police insignia, and another shaped like a bone, engraved simply, "Faith Earned." They walked the riverfront together. Vendors were just setting up their stalls, and the aroma of brewing coffee drifted from the cafes. A few people nodded or waved, some knew Damon by name, others only recognized the famous shepherd at his side. Bravo accepted the attention with the calm grace of a veteran, tail swishing lazily. They stopped near the mural. Time and weather had faded the paint a little, but the eyes of the dog on the wall still burned bright. Someone had added a new detail since Damon last checked, a small blue line painted through the background, symbolizing both the river and the thin line of those who served. He stood for a long time, just looking at it. "You know," he said softly, "they're still talking about you, partner. Every rookie in training hears your story. Holt even named the new ethics division after you, the Bravo Initiative." He chuckled. "Bet you never thought you'd have your own program." Bravo sat beside him, leaning gently against his leg, the quiet weight of loyalty grounding the moment. Later that morning, Damon stopped at Hattie's diner. It had changed too, though not much. The paint was fresher, the sign replaced, and the corner booth now had a small brass plaque, reserved for those who kept the faith. Mara Quinn sat there waiting, dressed in civilian clothes for once, dark jeans, soft blue shirt, hair shorter than before. She looked up and smiled as Damon approached. "You're late." "I was catching up with an old friend," he said, sliding into the seat. She followed his gaze toward the window, where Bravo lay outside near the mural, head resting on his paws. "Still guarding the place, huh?" "Always," Damon said. "Even in retirement." Mara stirred her coffee. "He's earned it. You both have." Damon smiled faintly. "How's DC?" "Louder," she said. "But the work's good. The task force grew, we're replicating Savannah's model in 4 states now. Turns out decency scales, if you keep the right people in charge." "That's good news." She nodded, then looked at him more closely. "You look different, Whitaker. Lighter. Happier." He hesitated, then shrugged. "Maybe it's just the peace that comes after you stop waiting for the next hit." She smiled knowingly. "And Evan? Last I heard, he's still teaching. Travels between bases now. Sent a postcard last week from Nevada, something about training handlers for the new K-9 program. Said to tell you the Sunsets here still win." Mara's smile softened. "That sounds like him." The waitress came by, dropping 2 plates of eggs and bacon. She winked at Damon. "The legend's share is bagged to go." "Thanks, Clara," Damon said, grinning. After breakfast, they stepped outside. The air was warmer now, touched with the scent of rain on the horizon. Bravo rose immediately, tail wagging at the sight of Mara. She knelt, rubbing the dog's neck affectionately. "Still the best detective I've ever worked with," she whispered. Bravo licked her hand once, then sat back down, regal as always. Mara stood, brushing her knees. "I've got a flight tonight," she said quietly. "But I wanted to see the both of you one more time before I go." "Any particular reason?" Damon asked. "Just wanted to remember how it feels to stand where something right actually happened," she said, looking toward the river. You don't get many of those reminders in DC. Damon smiled. Then take this one with you. She nodded. I will. They stood together in silence, the mural behind them, the river stretching wide and unending ahead. That evening, clouds rolled in from the east, painting the sky in grays and violets. Damon and Bravo walked along the pier once more, just as they always had. The wind carried a faint echo of thunder from somewhere far away, more memory than storm. You've been with me through every fight, Damon said softly. Every dark alley, every bad call. Guess I never said it enough, thank you. Bravo looked up at him, eyes steady, tail sweeping once. He didn't need words. He never had. Damon sat down on the bench near the water, the same one where he'd written his journal years before. He pulled a folded letter from his jacket pocket, Evan's handwriting, the last one that had arrived from Quantico. He'd read it a dozen times, but tonight he opened it again. Whitaker. It's strange being on the teaching side. You start to see patterns, how men break, how they rebuild. You'd be surprised how many of them ask about Savannah. Guess stories like ours still travel. Bravo's name comes up more than mine. That's the right order of things. Keep walking the line, brother. The world needs the kind of quiet strength you carry. Semper Fi. Evan. Damon folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into his pocket. The last light of sunset flickered across the river, and he watched it fade into the oncoming dusk. He spoke quietly. He's right, you know. About you, about everything. You made them believe again. Bravo gave a low, contented rumble and rested his head against Damon's knee. The wind stirred the water below, scattering reflections like memories. For a long time, they sat there, man and dog, still and unbroken. 2 months later. The first summer storm of the year arrived like a sigh, not a roar. Soft rain swept across Savannah, tapping gently against the windows, cooling the air. Damon stood by the window of his apartment, coffee cup in hand, watching the streets below blur in silver streaks. Behind him, Bravo slept peacefully near the couch, breathing slow, steady. The old dog had slowed more these past weeks, preferring naps to patrols, sunbeams to sirens. Damon didn't mind. Every day with him was a gift. A soft knock came at the door. When Damon opened it, a delivery boy handed him a small package wrapped in brown paper. No return address, just neat block letters, from ER. He smiled, already guessing. Inside the box lay a polished brass coin embossed with a Marine insignia. On the back, an engraving read, "Some battles end. The bond doesn't." Beneath it was a single photo, Evan standing beside a new class of recruits, Bravo's framed picture on the wall behind them. Damon exhaled slowly, emotion rising warm and sharp in his chest. He set the coin beside his badge on the table, its shine catching the faint light. "Look at that, Bravo," he whispered. "He's still teaching your story." The shepherd stirred, opening one eye. His tail thumped weakly against the floor. "Yeah," Damon murmured, kneeling beside him. "We did all right, didn't we?" Bravo sighed, closing his eyes again. Damon sat there for a long time, one hand resting on the dog's side, feeling the slow, steady heartbeat beneath the fur, the rhythm that had carried him through everything. A year later. A plaque appeared near the mural outside Hattie's diner. Small, bronze, unassuming. It read, "In honor of Bravo. K-9 officer, protector, friend. He stood where others fell silent. And taught us all that loyalty is its own language." Every year, on the anniversary of the River Light case, officers gathered there quietly before sunrise. Some brought flowers, others small dog tags engraved with names of partners lost. Damon never made speeches. He didn't need to. He'd simply stand by the river, coffee in hand, and watch the light climb back into the world. One morning, Mara returned for the ceremony. She found him at his usual spot, the breeze tugging gently at his jacket. "Still coming here, huh?" she asked. "Wouldn't miss it," he said softly. He earned every dawn. They stood together as the sun rose, the river glowing gold. The city behind them stirred awake, its scars softened by time, its heartbeat steady again. That night, Damon returned to his apartment. He sat at the same table, journal open. The pages were nearly full now, notes, reflections, quiet memories written in a steady hand. He flipped to the last blank page and wrote slowly. "Some truths take years to rise, like light over a stormed sea. But when they do, they don't just illuminate the past, they show you the way forward." He closed the notebook, placed it beside Bravo's old collar, and leaned back in his chair. Outside, the river whispered beneath the moonlight. Somewhere far off, a ship's horn echoed, a sound he'd always loved. A sound that meant departure, but never loss. He looked toward the stars and said quietly, "Rest easy, partner. We'll take it from here." The night settled around him, peaceful and whole. And for the first time since that first stormy evening years ago, Damon Whitaker felt nothing left undone. The river flowed on. The mural watched. The city endured. And somewhere between memory and light, a shepherd still ran beside his marine, faithful, fearless, forever.